Dragon Ballers, if you're looking to buy Dragon Ball Super or One Piece sealed product, make sure to get 5% off using my link to Mystic TCG down in the description. You can also sell cards to them using their Facebook link, which is also down in the description. Yo, what's going on, One Piecers? Welcome back to another meta breakdown video. In today's video, I want to break down the top cut results of the PPG One Piece webcam case tournament that took place over the weekend. If you guys are new to the channel, my name is Joey. This is Crossworld TCG. I am primarily a Dragon Ball Super card game channel, but I've been getting a lot into One Piece, and I see myself playing it for this foreseeable future. So I figured I'd also get into content creation for One Piece, and a lot of what I do for Dragon Ball is competitive-oriented content, and I'm looking to do the same here for One Piece. So we'll break down the meta, we'll look at some deck lists, we'll talk about it, we'll break it down, and hopefully this helps you guys out, because generally I do get feedback that my Dragon Ball breakdowns do help players out. So hoping to do the same thing here for One Piece players. But anyways, if you guys are new here, make sure to subscribe, hit that bell so you never miss a video, and let's jump right on into this. So yes, this is the webcam case tournament that took place over the weekend, and if you guys are new to Bandai card games, PPG is the best tournament organizer, hands down. One of the main reasons for that, very quickly and promptly after each event, they post their event data on their website, ppgeventmanage.com. You can see it in the URL bar here. I'll link it down in the description. Very easy to access their data, which is so awesome for content creators and players alike. So this is all accessible to you guys. If you click on this link, you will find all of the deck lists here down. All you gotta do is scroll down. You see all the topping players as well as all of their deck lists. So today we'll look at first, second, third, and fifth, because fourth is another red-green law, so might as well look at a different deck list for Luffy. But yeah, let's break it down. So we have the total player breakdown. So this is all the decks played at this tournament. Now, the three most popular: Green Kid, Purple Kaido, and Red Zoro. As far as I've seen from tournaments that took place over in Japan, as well as what we've seen kind of starting out in the Western format, Kid and Zoro definitely makes sense. They're really popular. Even from locals I've gone to, I typically play against Kid and Zoro. Occasionally play against a Blue Purple Croc, a Dofi, but it's a lot of Kid and a lot of Zoro. Kaido being the second most repped deck is really interesting, and it kind of speaks to this phenomena that we see a lot when a card game comes from Japan or somewhere else in Asia and comes over to the West, right? And I have a lot of experience with this from Dragon Ball as well as from Yu-Gi-Oh! So generally what happens is players over in Japan and in that part of the world, they like playing games very fast paced and very aggressively. Generally, when card games come to the West, we like to, for whatever reason, play more grindy, more control-y types of games, more back and forth types of games. And that just might be very indicative of why Kaido is very popular in this tournament. Don't get me wrong, I've seen tournaments in Japan where Kaido has taken up a lot of top cut slots, but I've also seen a lot where Kaido hasn't topped or has taken up like 1 or 2 slots, right? So it doesn't seem like a super consistent deck at taking up a lot of top cut slots over there. But here, it's taken up, you know, second most in the room as far as a total breakdown, and also manages to top a large majority of this event, which is, in my opinion, just interesting. It's always interesting to see how that trends, you know, from where a game comes from originally, as well as where it, you know, spread throughout the world and how different regions approach the meta, right? And I think a lot of the rest of this makes sense as far as popularity goes. Odin at 3, I'm definitely surprised, but I think a lot of like set 1, you know, the card pool is very small, so a lot of the main decks will be pretty similar across colors. And then you're just kind of swapping your leader, and then maybe like a core 10 or 12 cards. Like Odin, for example, plays a core 10 cards that you know, you wouldn't normally play in the Kid deck, which is the more generic green deck, right? But anyways, let's look at the actual top 16 breakdown here. So we do have 6 Kid taking up the most slots in this top cut, which again is very par for the course from you know, Western and Eastern events. We're very used to seeing Kid take up a very large majority of events. So that means that going into these tournaments, you want to be prepared for Kid. I think generally a lot of people say that Red can struggle into Kid. So if you are a Red player, you're going to want to take a note of that and figure out a strategy for beating this deck if it is going to be that popular. And I don't see any reason why that would change, because again, it's been that way on the East, and it seems to be going that same way here in the West. But anyways, then we have Law taking up the next most slots in this top cut. Law is such a cool deck because he's kind of like a transformer, right? He's like a red deck in disguise. He gets access to really strong green cards, and that is the trade-off, right? You're playing a multicolor leader. Normal leaders start at 5 life, multicolor leaders start at 4 life, but the trade-off is you get to play the best cards in 2 colors. So that is a really cool thing there. But yeah, Law can put on some crazy aggression if it gets going, and the way it gets going is by putting 5 cards on board and then using the leader ability to pay 2, swap a card out, bring a card in undercosted, and that's generally the game plan of that deck. Now Kaido, again, talking about this, taking up a large majority of this top cut is very interesting. Definitely our primary control deck of this set 1 meta, just relying on big bombs. And once Kaido gets those big bombs down, it's really hard to interact with them, to be honest. Like, a lot of times they're too large to actually kill via effect or by battle. I think Kaido is the class example deck of just like losing to itself, interestingly enough, and we'll talk more about that when we get into the actual deck list. And then we do have 1 Luffy and 2 Luffy and 1 Zoro here. Now again, like, these main decks are going to be very similar because it's set 1. There are only so many cards you can actually play in each color pool, but I think a lot of people look at Zoro just being like the better red deck. I think that also speaks a lot to like set 2 in Japan. We've seen Zoro do a lot in that set, but Luffy is actually really interesting. I think a lot of players here, you know, at least from what I've seen from my teammates and stuff, have figured out ways to play Luffy in a bit of a more aggressive way compared to Zoro, because, you know, Zoro gets immediate value from 1 Dawn, giving your whole board plus 1k, but Luffy can make use of Dawn that you use immediately, whereas Zoro, a lot of times you're just attaching an active Dawn to your leader, which again is still a lot of value, don't get me wrong, but Luffy can play like Rush Sanji, for example, and then immediately attach Dawn to it, which in some cases can be a bit more aggressive. So I don't know, maybe hot take, maybe Luffy is a bit more aggressive than Zoro, but yeah, took up more slots than Zoro here, which is definitely super surprising. But let's take a look at some of the topping lists. We look at the first place list first. We have red, green, loss. So again, this deck, what it wants to do is it wants to put as many characters on the board as quickly as possible. And the way it's doing that, you can see, is by playing a ton of 1-cost characters. And this is cool because I haven't seen a lot of law lists actually take the Wano core into their main deck, but this list chooses to do that. And I think that's a really good choice because there are a lot of great Wano cards to search, and it gives you another 1-drop in the form of Momo to kind of flood your board with, right? And the cool thing about playing a multicolor deck, again, you're starting with less life, but you get access to 8 1-cost blockers, which most other decks don't have access to. So you actually get to be a bit more defensive in that regard. And again, it just plays perfectly into Law's game plan of flooding a board with 1-costs. And in this case, they're very defensive 1-costs. So yeah, Law, probably the best multicolor leader if I had to pick one. I know Blue Purple Croc is also very, very popular, and that's more of a defensive control-y deck, but I think Law is very explosive when it gets going. But yeah, as far as this goes, I also like this list a lot because it's very consistent for 1. It's just a lot of 4-ofs and a couple 3-ofs. I also like 2 that it seems to be minimal on cards without counter power, and you're actually playing a lot of 2Ks, which is cool as well. The only non-counterable cards, you have like your Laws, your Zoros, your Luffys, which are super essential, your Jet Pistols, and I don't really count the 1-cost blockers because they defend life anyway, so it kind of in their own way for 1 Dawn. But yeah, this list looks really, really clean. I'm a huge, huge fan. Then we have Kaido. So again, Kaido is the deck in the game that is, you know, premier at control. It's got a lot of removal at its disposal, which is honestly pretty frustrating to play against sometimes. But Kaido is so weird because more often than not, or I guess not more often than not, but a lot of times the way it loses to itself, right? And that's a lot to do with Onigashima, the field card. You kind of really need to see that on 2 in a lot of cases because you need to get that ramp, right? The typical curve for Kaido is turn 1, charge Dawn, and don't really do anything with it. Turn 2, go to 3 Dawn, play Onigashima, ramp, and now on turn 3, you're kind of in gear to play King and kill any 4-cost or less your opponent has in play. And that is key against a lot of matchups, right? If your opponent plays a Rush Zoro, you want to be able to spot remove it. If your opponent plays an Okiku, you want to be able to spot remove it. But if you miss out on that curve, you might be in a little bit of trouble. And that's what's really interesting about this build is that it's not actually playing any of the alternative rampers, and by those I mean the ulti or the Jack. Jack is a starter deck card. It costs 3. You pitch 1, ramp a Dawn in active mode. Ulti is play it for 2, but pay an additional to ramp a Dawn. So I noticed this list doesn't play any of those, interestingly enough. And yeah, I wonder how that choice worked out. And obviously it must have worked out well if this list came in 2nd place. And I guess there is Sasaki, which is kind of an alternative ramper, but he costs a Dawn to ramp, I believe. So it's still not solving the same problem of like playing King on 3. But regardless, that's why you have cards like Babanuki and Black Maria. These are cards you can play if you miss out on your ramp, right, and still be a bit proactive. Same thing with Queen. Queen is such an insane card. That's one of the criticisms of Kaido, is that it doesn't have its own top 5 searcher, but the trade-off is once you get to Queen and start cycling through your deck, drawing 2 cards in this game feels so powerful. Really, really good there. And then for the rest of this, we have a lot of 2K counters, which purple has at its disposal. We have, of course, the Blast Breath and the Thunder Bagua. So yeah, Kaido, really strong deck full of insane cards. You know, the board wipe, the 9-drop Kaido with Rush. These cards are super overstated. All right, then we go over to the 3rd place Green Kid list, which is sideways, unfortunately. But the number one interesting thing about this list, it does not feature the 7-drop Kid blocker, which is super interesting. I think that card is insanely good. I've seen a lot of discussions surrounding it, whether it's a 3 of, a 4 of, or I guess in some cases a 0 of. Now, the thing with that card is it's got a really bad matchup into blue, because both the blue Dofi and blue Mihawk can just spot remove them on play. So 7-drop Kid blocker doesn't have a lot of play in that matchup. But against everything else, I think it's pretty good, right? Like, Kaido can't really remove it unless they play the board wipe Kaido. Red has to invest a Otama and a Jet Pistol into it, so they have to invest 2 cards and at least 6 Dawn. And it's another really good card at protecting your 8-drop, and that's sometimes the name of the game with the Kid deck, is play your 8-drop and defend the castle. And we do that with a lot of our low-cost blockers like Beige and Killer, but having that extra blocker at the 7-drop slot does feel pretty nice. So yeah, I don't know how I feel about it. I don't think I would play Kid without a couple copies of the 7-drop, but it's definitely a super interesting decision. Then we have the 5th place Red Luffy. So going through this again, you'll see a lot of similarities to Zoro, and a lot of you guys have probably seen way more Zoro lists than Luffy lists, but generally I think again Luffy is able to be a little bit more aggressive. But I say that, and this build seems to be a bit more mid-rangey, because we have 4 copies of the film law, or the film promo pack law. It's kind of like an Otama, but actually has a respectable attacking body, and then you pair that with Jet Pistol. So for 4 Dawn, you're able to clear anything 6k, and then or sorry, for 8 Dawn, and then for 9 Dawn, you're actually able to clear anything that is 10k power, which is kind of cool bit, right? So you invest like a law, you invest an Otama, and then you play a Jet Pistol. Now you're killing anything that is 10k, which is actually kind of cool in the Kaido matchup, because a lot of their guys are really overstated and large. And then for the rest of this pretty standard red stuff, we have the unblockable Luffys. We actually, we do have the 4 Rush Zoros, just missed it because the alt art there. And then for the event lineup, beside Jet Pistol, we have Red Hawk. So Red Hawk is actually a really strong card, and it gets stronger against people who don't know how to play around it. So a tip for playing around Red Hawk: if you have a card on your board that is 4k power or less, if you can afford to do so and you want that card to stick around, equip some Dawn to it, because the Dawn is actually going to increase the card's base power. So as long as you hit above 4k power on a card, it cannot be hit by Red Hawk, even if its base power is 4k or less. Good tip to know. And then the 1 Diablo Jambe, really cool tech in red. Not a lot of lists play it that I've seen, but it is really good tech to turn off blockers. But this deck does already have a lot of cards that ignore blockers anyway, with the 2 Shanks and again the 4 unblockable Luffy's. So yeah, that pretty much goes over what I wanted to cover on the PPG side of things. There are some more smaller events that I do want to go over with you guys though. All right, so some data for some smaller tournaments. This is a tournament that took place at Mystic TCG, which is the sponsor of our channel and our competitive team. If you guys do want sealed product, make sure to use Mystic down in the description. You'll get 5% off, and when you're dealing with sealed product, 5% actually ends up being quite a bit. But anyways, we had the Mystic tournament here for Friday. We have 19 players, 7 red Zoro, 4 blue Dofi, 3 green Kid, 1 purple Kaido, 1 red green Law, 1 blue purple Croc, 1 red green Luffy, and 1 red Luffy. So we have a few deck lists here for you guys to look at, just to get more ideas for how you guys want to play the game yourselves. This is the first place blue Dofi list. Now the most interesting thing about this list does not include 1-drop Perona. The way the player described it to me was he didn't want to be forced to mulligan super hard for a card that kind of loses steam as the game progresses. It is really good turn 1 to get your game plan going, but generally you have other early plays you can do here, which seems to be why the 2-cost Jinbeis are included. But yeah, this is your first place Dofi list. And then we have a Zoro list. So since we didn't see a Zoro list in the PPG event, at least that we went over, here's one for you guys to take a look at as a sample. Pretty standard stuff. I wouldn't say anything in here is too crazy, but again, it's set 1. The card pool is very limited, so you can only play so many different cards. And then another Zoro list to get a bit of a different idea. This one, for example, plays more copies of the Rush Sanji, which is better and worse in different cases. Now this list doesn't play the equipping Nami, the 1-drop Nami that equips the rest of Dawn to things, which I think is better for the Rush Sanji. But I mean, again, if you're playing it on turn or 4 Dawn, you have the extra Dawn to equip to it. That works out plenty. And there was also another weekly tournament at Mystic this weekend. 15 players, 7 red Zoro, 4 green Kid, 1 blue Dofi, 1 purple Kaido, 1 green Odin, and 1 red Luffy. Here are the lists I was able to get for you guys. We have a different Dofi list. This one is a bit more standard, playing 4 copies of Perona. Now, what's interesting here is this is playing 4 Mihawk. Now, I think when it comes to blue, a lot of players have different thoughts on like how many Mihawk versus how many 7-drop Dofis do I play. And this list doesn't play any 7-drop Dofis. It opts to play 4 Mihawk. And I think that's really interesting when you think about Love Mellow. And this list actually doesn't play Love Mellow. It just plays 4 copies of Desert Spada, which actually makes a lot of sense because if you're tapping out 9 for Mihawk, you only have 1 left over for Desert Spada. You actually wouldn't have any Dawn left for Love. So I think as a deck building decision, that makes a lot of sense. And I love the 4 6k Pacifista with the 4 Kuma blockers. Just block, play a 6k that basically bypasses Summoning Sickness to attack on your opponent's turn. I love that combo. And then wrapping it up with another Zoro list, just so you guys can get a bit of a different idea for how some different lists are played. But anyways, guys, that's what I got for you in today's video. If you have any questions, comments, anything like that, drop them down below, and I will talk to you guys in the next one.